guess I'll pick right up where Tyler left off with this warning now from China involving Taiwan. I'm not sure what you made of that language. It seemed pretty stark coming from overseas this morning, but there are questions about potential policy changes and whether the U.S. should continue to provide weapons to Taiwan. What is your thought?
Well, first of all, talking is a good thing, and remember that the president right now is on Xi's home turf, and that's certainly something that Xi has promised to his own people, an aggressive approach to Taiwan. Remember, I mean, you know, I would say strategic ambiguity and just keeping the pressure on without allowing it to metastasize. And as long as we can just say, look, these are people that we respect, we have trade relationships with, and you know, I think as long as we just keep the pressure on. One of the things China has to make sure that they maintain is respect on the international stage. And if they are seen, you know, in an increasingly totalitarian fashion, and if they're aggressive towards Taiwan, they begin to lose respect in the other free parts of the world. So they have a balancing act themselves, and I think it's helpful to remind them of that. But I think, again, President Trump being there, his personal strength, the way that he's negotiating right now with Xi is a good thing for America. But I would say we're going to have relationships. So much of what we design here in the U.S. when it comes to chips, they actually get produced there. It's very important. We would not want China to have complete control of that, which is ultimately what they would seek. You know, there's a massive amount of trade that goes through that area, and a lot of it is produced that affects our economy here. When it comes to chips, you know, China doesn't just want, you know, they want Huawei to be producing chips on par with what we're seeing here with NVIDIA. So that's their ultimate aim. But again, I would just say we need to keep the pressure on and keep up our relationships as we have them right now with Taiwan.
Well, I'd also like to ask about how Iran factors in here in the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, Senator, still remains closed as you are speaking with us. The president, in an interview with Fox News, suggested she offered help when it comes to the strait, though the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in a separate interview suggested that Trump didn't ask for that help, that the U.S. does not need China's help. Is that really true? Senator, if we don't need anyone's help, why is the strait still closed?
What we need is non-interference. Yeah, we need non-interference right now. Look, the benefits of opening the strait is not just good for the U.S. and the American consumer. It's not just good for Europe. It's also good for Asia, particularly China. I mean, much of what their energy, it comes through there. So it would benefit them as well. We have demining operations going on. Ships that are not to or from Iran are able to pass through there. But I would say we can increase the safety over the coming weeks in regards to the strait. I was with the CENTCOM commander this morning, so I think they've had an incredible operation since February 28th. You look, this is a very significant 50-year-old problem that president after president has kicked the can down the road on, and President Trump's not willing to do that. He is solving a 50-year issue. And if it's going to take since February up until now, I know nobody wants to get this done quicker than President Trump and get this wrapped up and get prices lower for the American consumer. But you cannot have a nuclear Iran, and President Trump is fixing a 50-year problem.
You mentioned that you spoke with the CENTCOM commander, and I'm sure you can't share details of your conversation, Senator, but I'm just curious what you think about the options on the table here. If this strait remains closed, with or without assistance from China, do we need to resume strikes to force its reopening?
I'm going to leave those options up to the president, but he needs to have as many options on the table as possible. But let's not look at it as something that began end of February, beginning of March. Let's look at this as something that started in 1979. And we want to be done as quickly as possible, but you can't have a nuclear Iran. This is a country that has chanted death to America. I wouldn't say the bulk of the 93 million people have, but I would say the leadership, which is very oppressive and very disconnected from its own people, have chanted death to America for 50 years. And then they took ballistic capability, which they demonstrated in recent months, plus nuclear enrichment. They tried to marry those together. You know, this is something that we can't have on the international stage. Look, if you're paying $3 a gallon for gas or $2.75, and now you're paying, you know, $4, it doesn't matter if a nuclear weapon is headed your way. Let's fix this issue, and then that will fix the energy issue, and we'll get back to lower gas prices, but a lot more peace in the world after President Trump resolves this issue.
Well, Senator, you mentioned their ballistic missile capability. I'm sure you saw the reporting in the New York Times earlier this week that new intelligence assessments say Iran has regained operational access to 30 of its 33 missile sites and still has about 70% of its mobile launchers across the country and retained roughly 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile. I'm not sure if you're able to confirm classified information, but can you at least tell us, Senator, if you think those figures are wildly off base?
Well, I can't confirm any of that, but what I can say, if they dig something out from underneath the rubble and they stick it back out there, we certainly have access to decapitate it once again. So if they're willing to continue to allow their own weapon stockpiles that remain to be degraded, that's in our favor.
There has been some skepticism thrown on those numbers, which is why we ask, Senator, more broadly, are you being briefed from the administration? I know you mentioned, again, that you met with the CENTCOM head this morning, but is the White House briefing members of armed services and intel to your satisfaction? Because we're hearing from a number of Democrats and even some Republicans who say no.
Well, we've had the Secretary of Defense come here, Secretary of War come in. He's been very open, and not just focus on CENTCOM issues, but other issues. I mean, we've got hostages being held in Africa. We have major concerns around the world. It's a dangerous place. We're very blessed here in this country. But I'm grateful for their leadership. I'm grateful for their clarity. And look, they want to be very protective with the latest intelligence, but they are willing to share it when they come in and we ask the right questions. They're forthcoming, and I'm grateful for it.